Greek theological literature, everything is a problem. That word problem occurs more often than any other word, I would think, in scholarly so-called literature, where they don't actually believe in the Bible. You could be at Harvard and not even believe in God and teach theology. That's amazing. The public doesn't know that, doesn't care. So if you haven't got a chessboard to play chess on, forget it. When you go to a soccer match, no white lines, that's silly, isn't it? And I say, well, what sort of software did Paul have on his computer? That's silly. We all know that. So if you haven't got a Bible, when, properly understood, get the right Greek manuscripts, you can argue about some details. That's not really relevant. I think Jesus was a Bible person. He always says, it is written. What did he say to them, the liberals of the day? He says, you're much mistaken because you don't know the scriptures. That's clear to me. Now, I also know that Jesus was raised from the dead. I'm going to be debating a Jewish anti-Messiah, anti-Jesus person at some point, Tovia Singer. So we're going to talk about all that. My main argument is, I think that Luke is more likely to know what happened than you do. You got to a car accident and you didn't, or you saw exactly what happened in the car accident. And then a week later somebody comes along and says, I know better. No, you weren't even there. So on the simple principle of witness, right? What was Luke trying to get out of me with all that stuff? Was he trying to make money out of it? I don't think. Was he drunk when he wrote? I don't think so. Then I would tend to believe that. I believe Jesus is alive. If it's proven false, then the faith is gone. It's going to do something more useful. Okay, Matthew 24 is a huge problem in the commentaries. Why is it a problem? Jesus looks out on those buildings in front and he says, not a stone will remain one on top of the other. It's all going to fall down. And then he goes on to talk about his parousia. I'm using that word deliberately. That's the word for second coming. It's a big model now when people talk about the rapture, because it's now come to mean the pre-tribulation rapture. So it's a dead word. It's confusing. People are, do you believe in the rapture? Well, you've got to define the term before I can even talk about it. So I'm using the Greek word parousia. It means the arrival of a king to take over his territory. We know that from the literature of the time. Second coming. So, in Matthew 24, if you have any translations, fine. We don't prefer the King James because it's archaic and difficult for people. But the New American Standard Version with the marginal references is wonderful. The RSV and RSV, all of that is wonderful. Even the Catholic Bible, the NAB, New American Bible, it's done by lots of different translators. Don't panic. You'll get the truth out of every translation there is. Every translation is about 98% right. Everywhere. So it's not a big deal. But this is the NASU. In Matthew 24, what we normally do is read some verses round, so as long as we have a little time here. I will start with 24:1. Anybody who wants to read, has a Bible handy, chime in with the verse. 24:1 goes like this. Jesus came out, let's see, from the temple, right. Came out from the temple, and he was going away. When his disciples came up to him to point out the temple buildings to him. Verse 2. Sarah?
Oh, you can.
Okay. And he said to them, do you not see all these things? Truly I say to you, not one stone here will be left upon another, which will not be torn down.
Mm-hmm. Verse 3.
Later, Jesus sat on the slopes of the Mount of Olives. His disciples came to him privately and asked, when will all this take place?
Mm-hmm.
And will there be any sign ahead of time to signal your return
Yes.
at the end of the age?
Good. And 4? All right, 4, I'll do 4. Jesus answered and said to them, see to it that no one, and then I ask the audience for synonyms, bamboozles, what are the American words for this? Takes you in, fools you. Isn't that interesting?
Scams.
Scam. So this is the area where you're going to get scammed. And Jesus keeps saying, don't be scammed. So that's exactly what they do in church. They don't think. So don't let anybody scam you. Many will come in my name saying I'm representing the Messiah, probably. Not many people have come saying they are the Messiah, but probably the meaning, probably. Or both, doesn't matter. Will come misleading you with the word Christ. And verse 5 then, many will come in my name saying I'm the Messiah and will mislead many. That was your point, right?
Yep.
If you're not wary, and we weren't in the Church of England days, we didn't know anything about anything. Sermons every Sunday. I couldn't have engaged you in any conversation on the Bible. I know, I'm not lying to you, I was there. We didn't do Bible. So we were totally misled without even intending to be. Then, Sarah, you've got 6.
You will be hearing of wars and rumours of wars. See that you are not frightened, for these things must take place, but that is not yet the end.
Okay, let's stop and think about that. In conversation, when we use a word in a sentence and then the same word a couple of sentences later, one of the fundamental laws of language is that you don't mean something different, right? If you really want to get people messed up, you change the meaning of a word, right? We know that. So here's what historicism does. The people who don't believe in the future events as we do, they say the end there is not the same as the end in the question. Well, it is. They asked, what will be the sign of your coming, parousia, and end of the age? Technicians, you need some technicians. Heaven forbid that, you only pay attention to technicians. But in any business, you need a technical element, don't you, who understand the detail. In the Greek there, it's interesting. What will be the sign of your coming and end of the age? Not coming and the end of the age even. One article binds those two ideas together. What will be the sign of your coming and end of the age? Beautiful.
Implicit is this the understanding of that word age?
Absolutely. Age, everything.
Christ, the church, age. Right? The end of that?
The end of that age, yes. Not even the church age, it's age in a sense, but that's not a biblical, but exactly the end of the age. Now you've got 2 ages, one in the future and one now. That's brilliant. And Bishop Wright, who is the brightest in the evangelical world, he's corresponded with us graciously here and there. In his translation, he has the life of the age to come. Now you need to preach on this. I said to the student, I want you to preach on this 5 times every Sunday. Meaning, people don't understand this, you see?
John 17:3.
John 17:3.
This is life.
This is the essence of life in the coming age, immortality.
That you believe.
That you believe. Then you tell them about the crime scene. Augustine said it should read that you believe that the Father and the Son is the one God. You see, the public's got to get excited about this. You wouldn't put up with that in business, would you? Do you allow the bank to swindle it without protest? Augustine hailed as the greatest thing ever since Paul. He says this should read, you can read it in his homilies on John, it should read, this is eternal life. They believe in you, Father, and Jesus Christ, the only true God. How do you get people excited about that? And they, I want to get their blood boiling. Go to the pastor and ask about that. Do they preach on the Trinity? No. Another subject. Anyway. So, what will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age?
The blocks fit in here.
The blocks.
The blocks.
Right, the blocks. Okay. The blocks simply go like this. You have, it's hard for me to do it now without looking at it this way. The PEN. Yeah, okay, so it goes like this from left to right. The present evil age, followed by the kingdom of God. If you then move this one on top of there and do heaven, you've destroyed the narrative. That's what's happened. It's now become heaven instead of the present of the future age, the kingdom of God. The present evil age is Galatians 1:4, kingdom of God. That's all it blocks. I didn't know that. I sat through the, quote, best education in England. We went to chapel every Sunday and to chapel every day. I sang in the choir and that was cool. I reckoned it was cool to sing in the choir. I cannot remember a single sermon of anybody except when an American preacher came. I've told this too many times, but his name was the Reverend O'Heck. It was. God has a sense of humour. His name was the Reverend O'Heck. He got up in this raised pulpit. We had 600 little boys in the sporting school, little grey ties and grey shirts, clutching their books. And he said, Samson was a strong man. Something like that. I was riveted. What a fascinating way to speak English. I mean, the thing I can do fairly well is language. Hopeless in geography, hopeless in history, mathematics, totally spaced out. But he said, Samson was a strong man. Then he said, he built an ice cream machine, Samson did. And he said it had cogs and whistles and feathers and bells and all that. I'm absolutely riveted, this voice. Then he said, did that machine work? No! Maybe from Minnesota. He was, I don't know, but his name was the Reverend O'Heck. He was doing the rounds at all the private boarding schools where we were. What he said, the point of the sermon, I have no idea. But that much I remember. Isn't that amazing? We didn't know, and my family get tired of me saying, we didn't know nothing about nothing. We didn't know. I think that's a much more exciting way of saying we didn't know anything, right? That's very boring. But we didn't know nothing about that. We didn't. I'm not lying to you. I couldn't have known any of those things. That story, as you know, in our case, Armstrong came along and said, you should be keeping the Sabbath. Ten Commandments, come on, Anthony, 10 Commandments. Well, sure. Where is it? Fumble through, I found it. It says you to rest on Saturday. It does. That changed my life for 14 years. Into the vacuum of ignorance comes the devil with a twisted version. Isn't that amazing? So I think the lesson is teach your children the truth and they'll never fall for Herbert Armstrong, ever. Okay, back to the subject. What will be the sign of your coming and end of the age? These are Jesus' students, by the way. They're not dummies. You know, they didn't get it all right, but they had been taught by Messiah, Rabbi Messiah, for 3 years or so. And so they naturally say, they're looking at these buildings, and he says it's all going to fall down. And they say, tell us, what will be the sign of your parousia and end of the age? Isn't that brilliant? Some people then say, those dumb disciples, they didn't know what they were talking about. There is no end of the age, and they just write off the whole thing. That's pathetic. Jesus then explains it. Did you get the impression here that he said, there'll be no signs? No. I don't think so. But there's a whole school out there that you need to go after to help them with this. He didn't say, well, actually, there'll be no signs. It'll just happen totally unexpectedly. Because he said there, this is not yet the end. You see that in verse 6? I do think that wars and rumours of wars is a bit vague. It doesn't entirely tell me anything. I've seen wars.
Been going on for
forever.
6,000 years.
Yeah, so it's not exactly specific.
It's the intensity building.
It's the intensity. It's going to get worse. Then in 7, nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. Various places there'll be famines, and as Luke says, great earthquakes. Well, we've had earthquakes. I know, you know, this isn't quite clear to me. I'd be sitting there with my hand up in the front row and say, well, explain this further. And he did. All these things are the beginning of birth pangs. That's a very Jewish image. The Bible said, and the rabbis understood, that the kingdom age will be preceded by birth pangs because it's the birth of the new age. So the nice image from bearing a child, those are the beginning of the birth pangs. Now, as it turns out, this is the key to solving the quote problem. As it turns out, 70 AD, when there was a destruction of Jerusalem, turned out not to be the one he's talking about. I don't think he knew that. Jesus himself said, I don't. Only the Father knows the extended times. That's brilliant. See, our Christology kicks in there. We don't believe he's God. So he doesn't know. He says, I don't know. All he knows is Daniel and the prophets. He knows that in Daniel there's going to be trouble in the temple followed by the parousia and the kingdom. He knows that. As it turns out, this is the bit that I'm adding to the commentators that don't seem to see this. As it turns out, 70 AD wasn't it, was it? But you've got people called preterists who say it was. So Christ came back in 70 AD. Does that make any sense to you?
In the kingdom is now.
Yes, yes.
In the kingdom is now.
That is amillennialism, and that is Augustine who says that the kingdom began at the cross. So now you have been living in the kingdom of God, which, and you're smiling, I said to my friend, and then I said, well, wait a minute. You've got 23, well, more than that, millions of amillennial people who believe that, following Augustine. And you're shaking your head. I said, well, they're not more or less intelligent than you are. So how do you get people to believe that? I remember stepping onto the tube train, that's the underground train in London, going to the American school, your American school, where they were very kind to us in many ways. And I remember thinking, I've got to sort this millennial question out. How does that work? And here's how it works. Terry mentioned this already. It says in Revelation 12:9 that the Satan is now deceiving the entire world. He's the God of the age, God of the world. He has a huge lot of churches, doesn't he? If you're the God of something, you've got a lot of power. So Satan is the God of this age. I get it. Revelation 12:9. But in Revelation 20, it says an angel comes and arrests that devil, puts him in the abyss so that he cannot deceive the nations any longer. Do you want me to give you a theological discourse on that? I mean, here, our people are reading their Bible now, not reading it at the same time. That's just, it's dementia, is right.
Just like Luther said, it was the book of straw, right? Revelation.
Isn't that awful? That's James, actually.
James.
Ein Strohbrief, I tell our German friends, we're going to a German conference very soon. Ein Strohbrief. Luther also said early in his ministry, the book of Revelation is not a Christian book, shouldn't be in the canon.
That's what I said.
What? But they're all traipsing into a Lutheran church. This is painful
Just
ignorance.
on Terry's preterism, someone
Yes.
wrote to me this morning,
Yes.
if this is the kingdom of our God and of his Christ, they are both slum lords.
Hey, absolutely.
Well put. Quotable quote.
And it reminded me when I was in my home country of Nicaragua,
Yes.
which is being controlled by a despot on the similar level to the North Korean little fella. And it's my home country. I'm sad to say it's a mess. You know, it's a third world country, but we saw big billboards all over the place saying things like,
Jesus is the Lord and owner of Nicaragua.
Yes.
Jesus is the Lord and owner. And I look at the, what are they called? Potholes?
Oh, yeah.
There are potholes that are more like caverns.
Sinkholes.
Sinkholes. And I said to myself, well, if this is Jesus, I don't want Jesus as mine.
No.
The guy controls
He's
it.
not doing a good job, and I feel very sorry for him if he's the owner of this.
Yes.
See, they use it's a socialist system,
Yes.
and they use religion as socialists do, Christianity,
That's
to
right.
control the masses. So,
Was it in Nicaragua? We spoke in universities there, right?
yeah.
The one subject they wanted to discuss everywhere was tithing.
Tithing.
That's the only thing they really said. Does the pastor have a right to take a tenth of my income? Mathematically, I said, no, not in the new covenant. Not in the new covenant. It's for supporting the Levites. You want to give to any cause you believe in. That's wonderful. But that was the real issue for them. It's fun.
It's a good principle. Some should get more, probably.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But it's
fine
interesting that in the midst of that mess, ain't a word about tithing.
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
should you be
Yes.
worried about the kingdom of
Yes.
God on earth and how do we fix this mess? And
We had fun. We were in 3 different universities, weren't we, over there?
Yeah.
And they wanted to be engaged, but the main topic was, are we bound mathematically to a tenth? And I suggested to them that Paul didn't teach that to the Corinthians because he said, I didn't take any money from them. I could have it, I didn't bother. I don't think he was teaching them the tenth, but if you want to give the tenth, that's fine. Nothing to argue about.
since we're on this topic
Yes.
and related to Matthew 24, a lot of the preterist argument
Yes.
is based on the fact that, well, things are better and have been getting better.
Yes. Okay.
Say the preterists.
Yes. Yes.
What would your response be to that? So we're living longer, there are better drugs, you know.
But
drugs.
Jesus didn't come back, so an invisible second coming. That's Jehovah's Witnesses in 1880. It's Jehovah's Witnesses in 1914. It's Herbert Armstrong in 1975, predicting it. Did you see Jesus come? No, it came invisibly. Paul says that is cancer. He names Philetus and Hymenaeus. He names those two and says, if you believe that Christ came back invisibly, that's cancer. I wouldn't go for it. Cyanide in your coffee. Go for it. If you want to die, you believe rubbish like that. So that settled the issue for me, getting off the tube. I can remember the moment exactly. I thought, I've got it. You can't be reading the same book and not reading the same book at the same time. So if the devil is now deceiving the whole world, in the millennium he cannot deceive them any longer. That's got to be future. End of argument. I got that. I've never forgotten it. I think it's right.
Carlos, I would say this,
Yeah.
the world is getting better technologically,
Ah,
not
good.
morally.
Good point.
Good.
Good point. That's a nice distinction. Well, it certainly is with these machines, isn't it? Yeah, good point. Okay, so you've got my language point there. When Jesus says the end is not yet, there's only one end in the conversation. It's the end of the age, the end of the age.
Simple.
Very simple. But nobody knows it.
Gospel is simplicity.
Very, very, very much.
And how did you define the word age?
The end of the age is the end of the aeon. There are 2 ages, the present evil age, followed by the age to come. So all translations should have, not eternal life, it's not wrong, but it's fog. It's vague. It allows you to think of going to heaven when you die. Then you've got the narrative wrong. You've got a false narrative, and you're dying. You're drinking the Kool-Aid or whatever it was. Jim Jones.
That's why they have to get rid of Revelation. Without Revelation, we wouldn't have that roadmap.
No.
Right to the very end.
Absolutely right. And Revelation, you can tell people, is only a conglomeration of about 440 allusions or citations to the prophets. So Jesus loved all that. So we had a dear lady who dialogued on this issue, so I'm doing it without notes, because I know this well. 9 months on this subject. And she's convinced that there are no signs Christ could come back today. And she's anti-Zionist, and I am too. She was right. The rabbis say, unless you've got Messiah in Jerusalem, you can't have the kingdom now. So Zionism is also wrong. You don't love a Jew just because he's a Jew. Jesus said that. Your father is the devil. Oh, we're children of Abraham. Well, bully for you. Actually, no. The devil is your father. So you don't love a Jew just because he's a Jew. The Abrahamic people went wrong because they said in Genesis 12, he who blesses you is doing good. He who curses you, Abraham. They said, oh, it's the Jews. No, 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 no. You are the seed of Abraham. They nearly threw me out for that, by the way. I dared to say, now I believe in the future of Israel, the nation. I do, that's clear. But in giving one truth, they weren't able to handle the two truths. It's also true that you are the Israel of God. You're the true circumcision. Don't give away your identity to an unconverted Jew. That was my point. And two of them who didn't believe there was a Satan said, get him out of that college. They weren't able to handle the grasping of her totality. Both things are true. So it's a major point. The end then is not yet. I get it. Then as you read down, other things are going to happen. They will hand you over to tribulation. That's not the great tribulation yet. We've all experienced tribulation, I think, in our lives. I get that. Many fake prophets. Look at this 11. Many false, fake clergy, lying clergymen. Do they get up and intend to lie? No. Do they get up in the morning and say, I'll show these people I'll lie through my teeth? But they haven't done the homework. My father said to me, he didn't lecture us very often. He said, you'll find out, lad, as you go through life, that most people are just in the group thing. Group think. They haven't thought. And our job as educators is to say, please think. You know, teachers try to do that. Okay, so you've got all this stuff here. Now like the 13, the one who endures to the end. Now there the end would have a different meaning, I get that. Enduring to the end of your life, probably, right? The end is not exactly the end of the age there. But wait a minute, what about 14? This gospel of the kingdom will be heralded in the whole world as a testimony, as a witness to all the nations. And then what? The end will... I get it, Jesus. I understand you. You talked about the end of the age, and then you said the end is not yet. Now you say that's when the end comes. When does it come? When you see the AFD, the abomination of desolation, in Mark's version, standing where he ought not to. These are the technical things. The he there in Mark 13, 14, the parallel. You get this text 3 times over, you know that. Why? Because it's so important, probably. Why have you got 3 versions of Jesus' teaching? And you've got John as well, but you've got 3. Well, because it's so important. Don't want to miss it. So what do they not preach from? These Gospels. They don't. If you listen to the sermons of Billy Graham and the boys, they mostly preach from isolated verses in Paul. Not from here. And the one thing you mustn't miss is the teaching of Jesus. And Paul did well too, of course. So what I've come along to the group and say, let's look at Paul and the kingdom of God. He preached the kingdom of God in Acts clearly, just like Jesus did. So one of my colleagues said, if Paul preached a different gospel from Jesus, Paul would put himself under his own curse. That's good line. Bill Wattell, you might remember him. Okay, so the end will come. Now, therefore, when you see, isn't that brilliant? This is when the end will come. When you see the AFD, the abomination of desolation, standing where he, masculine pronoun, breaking the rules of grammar, technical point, but interesting, the abomination is a person, standing where he ought not to, in a temple building, presumably, some holy place, then what are you supposed to do? It doesn't say what you do in Georgia. You go and stay with Terry Anderson in Minnesota, or whatever.
In the cold.
In the cold.
Freezing.
Isn't that interesting? See what's happening now in the story? He's beginning to talk about the end of the age and the parousia. But they were looking at those buildings. You see, how that's difficult for people. That's difficult.
Actually, just off the top of your head or anyone else, can we have a verse or a parallel where end of the age is equals to the judgment or the resurrection?
Absolutely. You've got 5, and that's exactly what you do. With word studies, you get your magic machine, I called it in class. Your Bible works 8, 9, 10, is it? Strong's Concordance is old, fine, but it's terribly slow. This thing will find out end of the age 5 times in Matthew. This is what you do. Okay, what did Matthew mean when he said end of the age? Then we'll know what the parousia is. So you make your equations. You string the pearls and you join the dots.
1339. The harvest is the end of the age.
Got it. Let's start with that one.
Yeah.
1339. The harvest, I get it, is the end of the age. Was that 70 AD? As it turns out, and Jesus didn't know, I don't think. That's been the problem for people, right? How can you look at those buildings and then talk about the second coming? You can if you think, relax and think like a Hebrew. Because in the book of Haggai, I won't turn to it, but in Haggai it says, this building in its present form, and this building as it used to be, and this building as it's going to be. That's to think in a Hebraic manner, to grasp a totality, but people in the West don't do that well. So this is a major problem. I'll tell you where it goes wrong in the commentators just briefly in a moment. So, when you see the abomination of desolation standing where he ought not to, then you go back to the, as you said, end of age, you got it there in Matthew 13?
Yeah, so the context is about the seeds
Yeah.
sown by the Son of Man versus the seed sown by the devil.
Yeah.
The harvest is the end of the age. The reapers are angels. The weeds are gathered up, burned up.
Yes.
So it will be at the end of the age.
Got it. There's the second one.
And then the Son of Man will send out his angels,
Yes.
gather them.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. It's
So
either
this
the barn or the bonfire. You need some slogans.
40 minutes.
In business, I know you need slogans. Everybody has, Coke is it. It isn't, but that's a bad slogan. You have a slogan. So one of the slogans would be then, end of the age would be barn or bonfire. You had to go into the burning of the bonfire or into the barn, the wheat, into the kingdom. All right, so we've done two of them right there.
Anthony, may
Yes.
and that looks forward to the second resurrection, because nobody is finally judged until the end of that second resurrection.
You're clear. You're not in the second resurrection.
Right? Well, maybe not. That's up to God to judge. I think judgment gets down to not the part where we need to, as Christians, discern good and evil.
Yeah.
Judgment comes into saying, you're going to hell and you're going to burn,
That's right.
and that's it.
Yeah.
We don't know that because we don't know God's plan. People
Paul
can
is very
change. What,
positive.
Anthony,
Yes.
what if we would have died
Yeah.
before we had this knowledge?
Oh, well, that's up to God to deal with that.
Yeah.
The second resurrection.
That's the judgment.
Yes,
Are you going to be in the first resurrection or
Yes.
the second?
that's right.
But the second is final. That's
Paul is a
final.
little bit more positive, though. He doesn't say, I hope I'll be there.
Right.
And he does watch himself, I get that, but that's a little bit of a Herbert thing. We were moved, we can't do that, we're wrong. That was a little bit off balance, I think.
For the scum of the earth.
Yeah. Yes. Actually, you should be on the positive side. I'm fully convinced you're going to be in the kingdom. You should be. Yeah, you had a bad attitude.
And I got a connection to the end of the age as
Yeah.
well.
Yes.
I got I don't remember which paraphrase or translation of
Okay.
Daniel 12:13.
Yes,
But as for you, Daniel,
Yes.
go your way
Yes.
until the end
yes.
of your life.
Of your life.
For you
Yes.
will rest and
Yes.
rise again for your allotted inheritance
In the
at
kingdom.
the end of the age.
Yes. So the angel didn't say to Daniel, well, I'm hoping you're going to make it.
So,
I think we should be very much on the positive side there. But still watching ourselves lest we be a castaway. I get that. But the Herbert Armstrong thing was predictably negative because there's so much was wrong in the teaching there.
and the reason this is important to define what the
Yes.
word age means is because this whole preterist
Yes.
thing where they have redefined it to mean
Eternity.
or Torah, the end of Torah with
Oh,
the
yes.
temple
Yes.
destruction in
Oh,
70 AD,
right.
and that was the end of the Torah age.
Right.
Good point.
It's just
So,
wrong. It's
that's
the end
why-
of the age leading to the age to come. So the translation that Bishop Wright has the life of the age to come. That's easy. I would teach that first Sunday if I were a pastor. And let's get this clear. Then you can do your performance on the famous Fiddler on the Roof. I've done it over and over again. You remember the scene, and all your children should see that, because it's a good Jewish story. When they get a little tipsy, they had alcohol at the wedding. Remember in that show? I'm not advocating dancing on the tables. That's another thing. But they sing, to life, l'chaim. You get a little Hebrew there. To life, in the Hebrew, l'chaim. You do an umbrella in the front row when you're doing Hebrew, l'chaim. That's exactly what you have in Daniel 12:2. Those whose names are written in the book of life are going to get the life of the age. In Hebrew, chaye olam. Olam means the age. Chaye, the life of the age. And the rabbis were very clever, smart. They said, if it's resurrection life, it's the life of the age to come. That comes into our New Testament 41 times as the life of the age to come. Isn't that beautiful? But I didn't hear anything about that in church. We were going to fly up to heaven. If we were good, if we didn't kick the cat, we weren't rude to Aunt Bessie. We were good people.
Good.
We go to heaven.
I always try to say decent.
Decent. I like that.
Jesus said, there's none good.
I like that. I like
And
that.
if we didn't eat meat on Friday.
If we didn't have meat on Friday. What else? And if we're Baptists, if we didn't touch that wicked alcohol. It'll put you in eternal hellfire. Anthony, your narrow hips are going to burn forever. I've got the handout to give you guys. I won't read the topic of that. What you said. Most of the comments are very positive. In fact, I'll remind you, you're the one who says, when I get the magazine, I always read the comments first. I will too.
I do. I think everybody does.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that's great hope to see the gospel's going out throughout the world. And God has got elect scattered throughout the world. And it's wonderful. I just love reading that.
Yeah.
I mean, I wish we had 4 pages on those comments.
I think we'll just scrap the whole thing and just put comments. We could do it. We could actually do
I
it.
think you really ought to add more.
Maybe.
Because I think it's great hope for everybody to see those. And the trials and tribulations some of those people are going through. I have been through none of that.
I know.
We are so blessed to have what we've had for decades.
That's
and
so
decades.
true. We're wondering about going to Istanbul. That's what we're planning to do. And then Barbara read something about how an American was put in prison for 35 years for doing Christian stuff. But our friends have reassured us that Turkey is a Christian nation. I mean, it allows. Is that right?
It's not illegal to be a missionary.
Okay. We may get away with it in the hotel. We're going to fly to.
There are many churches. There are many.
Yeah.
Well, Erdogan fancies himself as the next imam. I think
he probably does.
The one to come. He's trying to institute this caliphate.
You know, it's interesting because modern day Turkey is where the 7 churches are.
Yes.
So really, some even call it the cradle of the early Christian movement. Anthony, just to go back to the end of the age.
Yes.
So we are seeing in context that the end, specifically of the age, has to do with judgment and the resurrection.
It's the day of the Lord.
So we got Matthew 13, 39.
Yeah.
39, 40, and 49.
Yes.
Now, but can you explain that in light of verses like, I'll just take one because I just saw this in the NLT, Hebrews 9:26.
The what translation?
The New Living Translation.
Okay. NLT.
If it had been necessary, Christ would have had to die again and again, ever since the world began.
Yeah.
But now, once for all time, he has appeared at the end of the age.
Yes. End of the ages or singular plural?
They have singular.
It's the consummation of the ages.
Yes.
So they have the NLT at the end of the age for some reason. So
I've forgotten if it's plural or not there, we'd have to look at it. But relax, because there's a sense in which the end of the age came when Jesus was there. That's true. You have to handle that.
That last 2,000 years is that age.
Exactly. That can also be said in the New Testament. Not a problem.
Most have plural ages.
Ages.
But for some reason the NLT has age.
It's not right. It should be end of the ages. And ages is everything that happens in those times as well. Now, that's exactly the relaxation we need of audiences. No, don't panic.
Which is also the aeonos, plural, the ages will come to an end at the second coming.
That's true.
And a new one
even beyond that, right?
will commence, right?
And then you go into the ages of the ages. That's into forever.
That's when the Revelation.
Anthony, in the New Testament churches, when they were gathering in houses like this, they had disagreements. And Paul had to correct them. No, don't do this, don't do that, and this is not correct. So I mean, it was going on just like we're discussing.
Exactly right.
The key is that we don't disparage anybody for asking a question.
No.
So we handle all of these
that's
things
a favorite
in the
theme
spirit
of
of Christ.
Right.
So who's Paul here?
Yeah.
Who's the one who's going to bring us
we
up?
give the sermon on this. You cannot have apostles like Paul. You cannot. You have to have seen Jesus, number one, and you have to have the accrediting signs and wonders to be an apostle. So forget Herbert being an apostle.
We have the word.
Yes, we do. You could have apostolic. I mean, I hate the term. Let's not call anybody an apostle. It's just misleading. Yeah. But you cannot be an apostle at the level of the 12 or 13 with Paul, because you haven't got the accrediting signs and you have not seen Jesus personally. That's the end of that story. Okay, that's a good point. So we've got what we're actually doing the exercise there, collecting end of the age. We found it there in Matthew 13, 3 times, Sarah? And then we found it also then.
Daniel 12.
That's the Old Testament. In the New, we've got another one. What's that one?
Matthew 28. 19.
Okay.
20.
Let's just refer to that one. You need to turn to it next day. I'm going to be with you until the end of the age. Matthew 28, 19. 20. Now then, our friends will say, our friends in the X-Way group, butchered that verse. They took the word out, baptizing. This is the crime scene. This really gets me started. Some people want to give money to them. I wouldn't give them money. I mean, you can be friends with them, help them out, but they actually, in their translation, they say the word baptizing should be there. Well, it's in every manuscript. They took it out. They put a footnote. Well, the Shem Tov, that's supposed to be a Hebrew version of the New Testament, which is not scripture at all, has something like that. That is absolute fraud, my dear man. I'm going to have to warn these people strongly. You cannot play with scripture like that.
The revised English version of Spirit and Truth.
You have the note there on Matthew 28?
Yeah, the Shem Tov, and they point to the fact that apparently Eusebius of Nicomedia,
yeah, that's right.
At the council, which is an interesting bit of information, used a text.
Yeah.
He got a manuscript that did not contain the so-called...
The Trinitarian thing, yes, but did that text get rid of the word baptism? The one they're
yes,
alluding
because
to?
it says... oh no, you're right. It goes forward. So it just says baptize in the name.
Yeah, but it still says baptize. But these rogues, these guys, good people, whatever phrase we use, they've taken it out. You can't do that. That's dangerous because you're twisting the scripture to your own destruction. That's awful. Okay, we got diverted there. Then it gets very exciting when he says in 15 then, therefore when you see the AFD, that's 4 times in Daniel, in chapter 7, chapter 8, chapter 9, chapter 11. Most people don't pay attention to that. Jesus says in parenthesis, or the writer says in parenthesis, be careful to listen carefully. I'm talking about Daniel, so that's exactly what we don't do. They make it up. It was the Pope or something else. Okay, so there it is. That's the warning. If you're in Judea, you have to flee. What you do in Georgia, I don't know. I have no idea what we do. Have to wait and see.
Hey, Isaiah 26.
Isaiah 26? Which says?
Go into your dwellings and close the door until the Lord be passed over. For he comes out of his place to punish the earth.
Yes. It would be a hiding place of some sort. Petra was what we thought, and all that. I don't know about Petra. Maybe Petra, but if you're in Georgia, I don't know. Going to Petra might be a place. Anyway, we'll see. But the story is beautiful here. Then if it's in the winter, that's not going to be so good. All on the Sabbath. Only Matthew mentions that with a particular interest in the Jewish audience. Mark doesn't even mention the Sabbath. If you want to keep the calendar, go for it. But the calendar is a shadow, and the Messiah risen is the substance. I don't want to do the shadows when we've got Messiah.
So why did he say Sabbath here when this was looking forward to the Christian
Well, because
churches?
people in Judea would still be keeping... We saw that in Israel.
Yeah.
We saw some rabbis trying to stone a kid for bicycling on
This
Sabbath.
is talking about Christians.
But the gates
Yes,
were the gates
but they closed the gates. It's harder to get out. Doesn't mean they're keeping the Sabbath, I think. That would contradict everything else. But it's harder to function in the winter by external things or Sabbath keeping, probably that would be the reason. Anyway, you get the point. The problem, quote, has been for commentators, how do you deal with this? Because he's looking at these buildings, you see. Then he goes on to talk about the Second Coming. Well, the Second Coming wasn't in 70 AD. But they've got their verse. This generation will not pass until all these things happen. That's the preterist cry. That word Yene'ah does not mean nation. That doesn't work. Meaning the Jewish nation will go on. That's wrong. It doesn't mean 40 years. It means evil society. How do you know that? Because the very next line, Jesus said, heaven and earth will pass away. See the parallel? He explains himself in the next line. Heaven and earth, this present evil society will not pass away till all these things have happened. That's the solution to that one. That's easy. Got good articles on that written by others too. Otherwise, he was wrong. Right? If you said 40 years, Jesus failed. That's impossible. So it's explained in the very next line. Heaven and earth, the present evil society will not come to an end until all of these awful things have happened. Okay. Woe to you then if you're pregnant at that time, in verse 19. So how long could the Great Tribulation be? Do you think 2,000 years will work? You're smiling, but the dear people of the Church of God, I didn't win with Bill Ortell even on this point. They had been taught by a guru, by the way, somebody who was very fierce, unlike most of the Church of God. They'd been taught that the Great Tribulation was definitely 70 AD. Then they're stuck with verse 29. Somebody read verse 29 here. What does that say? Verse 29.
I'll read it. Immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light. The stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken.
And they will see the Son of Man coming in great glory, which is the second coming.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a problem. Immediately after. Let's argue about immediately after. Let's not. Those dear people who are historicists, the technical historians, not preterists, but historicists, they said, it's got to be 70 AD because they're looking at that building. I get that. That's the problem that I'm solving here. It doesn't matter for Jesus. They knew about trouble in the temple. Jesus himself didn't know. There might be 1,500 temples, I suppose, theoretically. I don't think that's true, but not 70 AD. Otherwise, immediately after isn't going to work. So I wrote to Donald Hagner, who has the Word Biblical Commentary on this point, how do you deal with this? And he winds up saying in a very convoluted and difficult way, language that most people couldn't understand, Matthew got this wrong. Matthew edited that immediately after and got it wrong. Isn't that interesting? That's awfully bad. Matthew's editing was wrong because it gives the impression that the second coming will come immediately after the temple destroyed in 70. You get the point? Isn't that interesting? The way the human mind works. No, immediately after, there's got to be trouble close to the end here.
Plus, all scripture is God breathed.
Of course. They don't believe that out there. They don't learn that in theology.
They think it's Matthew talking. It's not Matthew talking.
That's right. He said Matthew edited this wrong. That is scholarship. And don't give your funds to some liberal scholar. I mean, that's just terribly wrong. Not that you would think of that. Okay. So, I'm just skipping to get the main point over. So he then says in verse 21, there will be great tribulation, such as has not occurred since the beginning, nor ever will. How many of those can you have? Only one? Is that right? There never has been. This is an important subject, you think. The worst time of human history ever. Worse than now? Yes. Worse than the Second World War, where my mother and nanny, that's not grandmother, but the nanny who was hired to work with us, they had their garden shovels ready for the Nazis who were coming 22 miles across the channel. We were on the brink of disaster. But this is much worse. Is this worth a sermon or two? Oh, we don't preach sermon. I'll talk this afternoon probably to the pastor at a Methodist church. We're doing a concert, not a religious thing, but a concert there. And I will get round to asking her, what do you make of the Matthew 24 stuff? And she's not going to know what to say. Make her think about it. Anyway, you got the point. Immediately after, I love that. Immediately after, there'll be a great tribulation, which happens to be the great tribulation. When you go to Olive Garden, I go in there, humorously say, this is not the great tribulation. That has a great point to it from my angle, because it's not. It gets worse than this, I'm sorry. It gets worse. All right, false Christ. Look at the fake here. 24, false messiahs, fake prophets will arise and will show great miracles. Well, everybody falls for a miracle, don't they?
Mm-hmm. They fall for tongues.
They fall for tongues. Nobody knows what they've ever said.
Imagine miracles. Right?
Imagine miracles.
Good point.
Terry's point was really good before when you said it took an apostle, Paul, to swoop down on those Corinthians, the church he'd founded himself. He says, you're nodding. Somebody comes bringing another Jesus, another gospel, another spirit. You're putting up with it. It took Paul stepping and saying, well, don't go there. Isn't that interesting? So don't assume that church members who are not thinking much are on the ball here. They're going to fall for it. Okay, so, behold, I've told you in advance in verse 25. I love that. I've told you all this ahead of time. So if they say to you, behold, he's in the wilderness, don't go out. So there's another deception. I mean, how much are you going to put up with? Miracles? Someone saying he's out here in the wilderness, don't go there. That's a lie. Falsehood. Don't go out in the wilderness. And he's in the inner chambers, invisibly. Don't believe them. Well, there's only 10 million Jehovah's Witnesses at your door. Are you working with them? They'll mark you after a while. They won't come. We try to help them. And as they go away in their car, I said, just please remember this verse. It does say, to which of the angels did God ever say, you're my son? Never. Got that? Well, then Jesus couldn't be Michael, could he? They don't even know that their founder didn't believe that. It's even mindless groupthink. They don't even know that. but they're at your door pleading with you to get saved. Barbara thinks they're here thinking they may live in this house in the millennium. That's where they want to come snooping. They do. They like the look of it. Probably, yeah. But you can work, you can drop a seed. You can drop a seed. You know, I do it. They won't come to us anymore. They've given up on me. It's a bad, hopeless task. Okay. So I've told you in advance, we got it there. Wherever the corpse is, the buzzards will gather. The vultures in England.
The buzzards.
Buzzards are noble eagles. Only in America are they vultures. I have to say that. It's a noble eagle. But in America, unfortunately, it's a vulture. Whatever that reference is, probably eating the flesh of the wicked people, you know, the vultures are tidying up. Whatever that means exactly. Doesn't matter. So, the vultures will gather immediately after, so you underline that in 15 colours, I told the students, 29, immediately after the tribulation of those days, sun will be darkened, cosmic signs, obviously. Did we get this right in Armstrong days? I've forgotten. Partially, maybe.
Yeah,
maybe we didn't.
So.
I think we didn't say it was 70 AD.
No.
But we set a date, though.
Oh, yeah,
1975.
75.
I was terrified when that came out. I was going back to the university, I remember that year. I was really disturbed by that.
I wasn't in the least.
Were you in on that?
No, I didn't care. Let him preach what he wants. I didn't believe it.
Even at that point? Wow. Bad attitude.
Yes.
Yeah,
you don't know the half of it.
Try to run the same time.
We'll get that at lunch. I want to hear the rest of the story.
Wow.
When we gathered in Pasadena, I was being kicked under the table and everything because I wanted out.
I'm glad.
I was challenging everybody then.
Bad attitude.
Yeah.
So nothing's changed.
Well said, Carmen.
You haven't learned your
I
lesson.
challenge everything in every
That's wonderful.
area.
Keep doing it, don't stop. In verse 31 then, he will send forth his angels. Isn't that beautiful? We've got angels gathering immediately after the Great Tribulation. So you put the synonyms together. The second coming is the end of the age, is the day of the Lord, in other passages, is the gathering, and is the harvest. Isn't that easy? So if you're the devil, what you do is you split all those terms up.
Complicate things.
You make it complicated. So the words have ceased to have the same meaning. That's what I preached to them this last week. I said, words have meaning. It was my sermon, words have meaning. Humpty Dumpty is the one who said, words mean exactly what I choose them to mean. That's Humpty Dumpty. That's what they do in church.
Let us never forget
Yeah.
that Satan is the most intelligent, brilliant
Absolutely.
being in the world
Absolutely.
besides God.
And Jesus, yes.
Jesus has
Yes.
gotten that information since
That's right.
for 2,000
That's
years.
right.
But Satan's had it since he was created. Brilliant.
Absolutely. And he's watching the human race and seeing how stupid we are. Hence Tucker Carlson.
Yep.
We are the sworn enemies of groupthink. I want to go on that program.
Oh.
How do I get on that?
Yeah.
I want to talk to you.
Yeah.
Tucker Carlson. I don't know if I can do it.
Yeah.
But I love your slogan. It's right.
Yeah.
It's sworn
Pomposity,
groupthink.
And he had four things.
Lying.
Lying,
Pomposity,
groupthink.
groupthink.
Sworn enemy.
Sworn enemy.
And I want to say we are the equivalent in the world of Bible.
Yeah.
Now let me have my say.
Who had this? What were you talking
Tucker Carlson on Fox.
He said those four things?
That's
He
his
says it
slogan
when
every
he
night.
signs off every night.
Oh, all right.
You haven't been watching
Gives
your Fox
over
News,
to
all right?
Well, we have, but I haven't watched it. I fall asleep. I haven't watched it. I haven't heard that.
That's his slogan. We all need slogans, right? That way.
Yeah,
That's good.
Anthony, before we wrap up,
Yes.
because I think you
It's
have
12
to go
o'clock, my
as
goodness.
well.
Yes, I have to go.
Can I just, for the camera and the recording, so we talked about the Great Commission
Yes.
and the revised English version. I just want to make this because I forgot.
For the camera, please.
It corrupts this version by Spirit and Truth Fellowship International. This is what it says. It's online. Therefore, go and make disciples of all the nations in my name, teaching them to obey all that I commanded you.
Left out
Does that
baptizing.
sound? Well, it lives out. It lives out baptizing them in the name of the.
Yes.
But this is an organization, just for the camera and the
Yes.
recording, that is against water baptism and many other things. Restoration Fellowship disagrees with. I just want to.
Yes. Thank you, yes. And they do teach speaking in tongues. You can go and watch Shane Hyde. He's jokey and having fun. And problem is that people don't know how to speak in tongues because they haven't been taught. Then he says, you just relax, take a deep breath, and you go, and I said, awfully bad. Now I'm going to try to get to him. I've got to try to get to him.
We in 2,000 years
Yes.
of the faith,
Yes.
someone can correct me,
Yeah.
but this has never been done in a translation or a paraphrase
No,
as far as I know.
no.
Leaving out baptism. Baptism.
Living out the whole thing,
Yeah.
baptizing them in the name of the
right.
Father.
Yep.
It's
To take out the word baptize. We only discovered that yesterday. That's why you're coming to us at a time when this is hugely important in the Church of God, this issue. Okay, so we don't have any more time. So I've got to leave. We're going to see you tomorrow night and hear the rest of your story.
Tonight.
tonight.
Is it tonight? It's Sunday today. It is. It's tonight. It is tonight, indeed. So we're there. We've got it clearly. It's all about a future temple, apparently, an abomination in the temple immediately after. Final text for the day would be Hebrews 5:9, which says that salvation is given to those who... Next word. I still have a job. Obey.
Obey. Yeah.
Isn't that interesting? You won't hear anybody preach it. Nobody will use that verse.